It's World Cup final week, let's get to selections, and to be honest, at this stage in the tournament, I thought these two teams, whoever made it to the final, it would be pretty easy to call who their 23 would be, but I don't think that's the case actually. A little bit easier with New Zealand, a lot harder with South Africa. South Africa, yeah, they've kind of forced their way through the quarterfinals, the semi-finals. Not perfect, definitely not a good game against England, but they won. And they've got lots of options, and they do play around with their selection a lot more anyway. So I think there's some big calls in South Africa. Let's get on to New Zealand, where all the big calls for me are on the bench. So the starting 15 for New Zealand is the same for me as the one in the semi-final. You could play around with it a little bit. You could put Retallick in for Whitelock, but I don't think you're gaining or losing much there. Scott Barrett is a definite starter, but he does need to control his urges sometimes. The back row looks absolutely perfectly balanced with Frizzell, Kane, Surveyor. The front row's obviously got a massive job on its hands, especially with the scrummaging from South Africa. Now you could again play around with the backs. Ioane, if it's a rainy day in Paris, which it looks like it probably will be, which I think is a big factor in selection, maybe you don't play Ioane, maybe you have him on the bench. I've noticed he's not quite as effective. Now, in those tight games, especially in the rain, his natural instinct isn't to go in and get stuck in. He wants to stay out wide, play to his strengths, and that's understandable. But I think playing around with it at this stage, I don't think there is a better option. So he's staying for me. But would you change anyone from that starting 15? So there's the first change for me. Dane Cole's in as a replacement hooker for Takiaho. Not because Takiaho is a bad player. He's an amazing player. I just think in the rain, a tight game, Coles' experience will be really important, especially coming on with Williams and Newell. They're going to have to face the bomb squad from South Africa. Oxenchade's been amazing. Vincent Koch, who's been excellent as well. So I think Coles for his experience on the bench. Then Retallick definitely coming on in the second row. Papali'i covers a lot of the back row positions. He's been doing well as the replacement. I don't think there's another back rower pushing through anyway. And onto the backs replacements, more changes for me. Cam Roygaard is the man who comes in at 9. Christie's a fine player, but I don't think he's a world-class player. Roygaard has got that ability to be world-class. His power game, if you want to score a try in the last minutes of the game, he's your man for me to change that game. Smith could play the whole game if needed, but Roygaard is a change-up. I don't think Christie is a change-up. Let me know if you agree with that. Leonard Brown is a very useful replacement, covering a lot of positions in the centres. Very solid. Could come on for Ioane maybe. And then Damien McKenzie, I'm afraid, goes. Not because I don't think Damien McKenzie is amazing. He is, but do you need 3 of them? That's what I'm saying. Mo'unga, Beauden Barrett, Damien McKenzie, they're all ball players, they're all quick, they're all creative. You just don't need all 3. That's what I'm thinking. If you need to cover 10, Beauden Barrett goes to 10. Then if you need to cover 15, you've got an amazing 15 in Will Jordan. Then Lester Finganuku comes onto the wing, and he is an absolute bulldozer. Like Roygaard, who do you want coming on in the last 20 minutes of the game? If it's a tight game or New Zealand need to score, well, it's Roygaard and Finganuku. I think if you didn't play those two and you lost, you would be gutted. You might have missed a trick. Let me know what you think of my New Zealand team. On to the Springboks. Huge calls for Erasmus and Inabar. You know, this is the call of their lives for these coaches, especially how they're going to play, how they're going to use their subs. South Africa have been very astute using their subs. In the semi-final, when things were going wrong, they changed very quickly. What's the front row going to be? Well, I think it's going to be exactly the same. Mbonambi obviously is going to start as their only out-and-out hooker. A few question marks over Mbonambi's availability going forward, but let's leave that for now. We don't know a lot about that. Kitsoff, Maherba, the starters, and then Unche and Koch, who's been so good off the bench. Unche probably their star player of the tournament. Fourie hasn't been coming on as hooker. It's been coming on in the back row, but of course is covering hooker. So those are my 6 front rowers. On to the second row. Yes, RG Snyman is in for me. He is so good off the bench, I know that. But I think he's by far their best second row, and I want to get a good 60 minutes out of him, at least, if not a whole game. I think if you just bring him on at the end, you're missing out on so much ability, although I understand if you do bring him off the bench, it's still pretty good. Anyway, back row, it's another change for me. Jasper Wiese comes in. Vermeulen was outplayed in that semi-final. I think 20 minutes of Vermeulen at the end is a really good impact. Wiese, that bit quicker, that bit more sprightly, a bit younger. I think it's what you're going to need against New Zealand, that extra speed. So he starts at 8 for me. Halfbacks, de Klerk and Pollard. I think it is all changed. They are your best halfbacks. Reinach had a poor game. Libbok got hooked off early because he just wasn't getting extra distance on his kicks especially. And Pollard, obviously, match-winning kicks, all that sort of stuff. So I think de Klerk and Pollard, they're ready to roll there in the halfbacks. Centres. Yeah, I'm sticking with my selection. Andre Esterhuizen, I think he's amazing. De Landy is very good, but he hasn't stood out for me. Get something else in there, a different picture for New Zealand. Esterhuizen is an absolute bulldozer, breaks tackles. I think he's a better ball carrier than De Landy, dare I say, and he's got a bit of an offload game. I think South Africa need to offer a bit more than just going straight up and down, and the kicking game, they need a bit of offloading. Esterhuizen is the man alongside Creel. Yep, another change for me, a bit more height. I think Colby and Arenza, a bit the same. Really tough on Arenza to drop out of the 23 completely for me, but I think Canan Moodie is an unbelievable talent. That extra athletic ability, that height, he could cover 13 as well. So Colby and Moodie, I think, is the way to go. And a change at fullback. Willemse really struggled in the rain in the semi. Plus, he's a fantastic replacement if you're going to go for a 6-2 split. And spoiler, I am. So Leroux there is a controlling, playmaking 15. On the bench, yeah, 6-2 split. Mostert, Quagga-Smith, Vermeulen, brilliant impact. That's their, ace card, if you like, bringing on more great forwards. So I think Mostert, Smith and Vermeulen, you could even place Van Staden in that role as well. I think they need to play on their strength and depth in the forwards. And then the two on the bench, Reinach, although Grant Williams could be a good call, but Reinach as a replacement 9, who's been going with this team for a long time now. And then Willemse as a replacement 10, 12, 15, perfect replacement for the 6-2 split, add some pace onto the team. That's the way I'd go for the All Blacks, for the Springboks. Let me know what you would think. Whatever happens in this game, I tell you what, we're going to get an answer. Who is the greatest World Cup team of all time? Now, I did do a video breaking down statistically who I thought the greatest team of all time was. Well, I didn't know what the result would be, but it came up with one of these, and the other set of fans, were disagreeing with it. So do have a look at that video if you want to. But whoever wins this game, I'll tell you now, goes clear as the greatest of all time. It's absolutely easy. So loads on the line. Of course, the World Cup and the greatest of all time. Let me know your selections, and I'll catch you next time.